Deciding where to spend your hard-earned money on a vacation can be difficult, and you might be looking at taking a cruise or going to an all-inclusive resort. Both can be carefree and cost-effective options. My name is Melissa, and I have been on 8 cruises with 4 different cruise lines, and I have been on over 15 all-inclusive resort vacations. In today's video, I'm going to point out some of the similarities and the differences between a cruise and an all-inclusive resort vacation, and I'm going to break it down for you by different categories like accommodations, pools, activities, and food, so that you can see what type of vacation is best for you. Before I get into breaking down the details, let me talk about what I like about each type of vacation. I love that on a cruise, I can visit several different islands or even countries. On a Caribbean cruise, you can find some of the most incredible beaches and just have a relaxing beach day. Or I can go take a tour of the entire island, or maybe even do both. You can also take an adventurous excursion, go ziplining or cave tubing. I think that a cruise is a great way to see different places that maybe you would want to travel to in the future or not, but without having to commit an entire vacation to that particular island. I love staying at all-inclusive resorts just to get away from it all and relax and unwind. Sometimes the toughest decision on an all-inclusive resort vacation is where to set up your towel, at the pool or at the beach. You can leave the resort, go into town and go shopping, go and see some historical sites, or do some adventurous things like ziplining. But at an all-inclusive resort, it's sort of on your time and only if you really want to leave the resort. Otherwise, you can just spend your entire vacation at the all-inclusive resort. Obviously, one of the biggest differences between a cruise and an all-inclusive resort is the destination and itinerary. So if you're staying at an all-inclusive resort, you usually fly into a nearby airport and you take a taxi or prearranged private transportation to get to your hotel. And then from there, you are usually at the resort and you might spend a few days going off regionally and looking at some of the sites or taking in some adventures. On a cruise, you often wake up and you're in a new country. There's nothing like waking up, going onto your balcony as you're pulling up into a new port and seeing the sights. Now on a cruise, it's much more structured. You have a set time when you can get off the ship and get back on the ship. Now on a Caribbean cruise for a week, you usually have 3 to 4 stops. And when you are not in port somewhere, those are called sea days. And on a sea day, you'll just spend your time on the ship enjoying what the ship has to offer. The entertainment can vary from place to place, but for the most part at an all-inclusive resort, you're going to have nightly shows. They change it up throughout the week and they might have something like a magic show, a kids show, a musical, something of that nature. But the one thing about those all-inclusive resorts, every place that we have been, the shows have been pretty cheesy. Now on a cruise ship, they have better produced shows. They are more professional looking. You might have some pretty spectacular musicals. We've also seen some great bands brought on by the cruise ships. At some all-inclusive resorts, we find that they'll bring in some entertainment over by the pool area or in the lobby bar or out by another lounge. And on a cruise ship, you're going to find those types of entertainers everywhere. You'll have musicians and singers at different lounges or in the promenade. Many cruise ships also have some smaller showroom type of venues where they might have comedy shows or other type of entertainment. There are actually a lot of similarities in the activities offered on a cruise ship versus an all-inclusive resort. You might find trivia, bingo, karaoke, ping pong tables, basketball courts, or other types of sports courts. For kids, you're going to find water slides or splash pads. On either type of vacation, you might find things at an additional cost like a cooking class or a tequila tasting. We have been to all-inclusive resorts that had go-karts, bowling, and an arcade. On a cruise, we have seen things like an ice skating rink, go-karts, an IMAX theater. All of these are at an additional cost. Now, on a cruise, they're going to have a sail-away party. I have not been on a cruise that didn't have one, so I think they pretty much all do them. And essentially what that is that everybody gets together near the main pool area as you are sailing away and saying goodbye to land during that cruise. And a lot of cruise lines will have other types of parties, like maybe an 80s night, where people go out by the pool, they have a DJ playing 80s music, and you can wear your 80s gear and rock out to 80s music. Over at an all-inclusive resort, we have seen things like a foam party at the pool where they fill it up with foam, or maybe there is a party over on the beach. Sometimes we have been to resorts where they might have Mexican night over by the pool and they have a little party and different things going on to celebrate the Mexican culture. Most cruise ships have casinos, and we have been to a few all-inclusive resorts that have casinos, but I feel the ones at the resorts aren't as well regulated, so we try to stay away from those. Overall, I would say that the cruises offer more entertainment and activities during the day, so much so that you have a whole little newsletter that usually your room steward will bring into your cabin and leave for you that has all of the next day's activities, so you know exactly where you want to be at any given time during the day. And there may be 3 or 4 or 5 different things going on at the same time that you have to choose from. At an all-inclusive resort, you might just have one thing going on at a certain time. Let me just be real with you. Whether you're going on a cruise or to an all-inclusive resort, you are not going to have the best food you've ever had in your life. They are cooking for the masses, and while the food can be good, it's not usually the reason that you are going to come back. But let's go ahead and talk about the food and what you can expect. On a cruise, you normally have a buffet option and the main dining room to choose from at no additional cost. You'll also have a few other places sprinkled in, like a pizza place or a burger place, that also will not have any additional cost. You can usually go to the buffet for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And the main dining room is usually open for dinner, and on sea days, they might be open for breakfast and for lunch. The buffets will usually have a wide variety of food options, including a salad bar, fresh fruits, a grill section, a variety of different entrees, and of course desserts. The main dining room is served a la carte style, and they usually change the menu every night. Now, depending on the cruise line, you may have an assigned time for dining, although I feel a lot of the cruise lines are moving away from that and allowing you to choose what time you want to eat or have some sort of freestyle option so that you can just show up when you want to eat. But there are still some options for you to have a set dining time every single night. Most cruise lines still have their tradition of having a formal night, and you may have one or more night that is assigned as a formal night on your cruise. Now, what that means is that you're supposed to dress up to go to dinner, and you will not believe how fancy some people get. We have seen men in tuxedos, women in ball gowns, but for the most part, people just dress a lot nicer. You might see men that are wearing a jacket and tie, and women in nice cocktail dresses. But a lot of the cruise lines are not really enforcing the formal wear. They may just request that you're not wearing your shorts and flip-flops into the main dining room, but in some cases, some cruise lines just don't care anymore and you can wear whatever you want. Other than those complimentary dining options that I talked about, you will have to pay to eat at a specialty restaurant. So you might have a steakhouse, a seafood restaurant, maybe an Italian restaurant, and typically you'll have to pay $20 to $40 per person to dine at those specialty restaurants on a cruise ship. At an all-inclusive resort, you will also have a buffet, and it will be set up similarly to how I described it on the cruise ship with the different stations going on. It'll usually be open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner as well. But for dinners, you usually have a lot more options to choose from. There is no main dining room, but you have a lot of little different restaurants to choose from, like your steakhouse, Italian, seafood. A lot of them have hibachi tables or Asian food. And then for lunch, they usually have some sort of grill near the pool where you can kind of get your quick bites. And some resorts will have 1 or 2 a la carte options available for breakfast and lunch. We have also been to all-inclusive resorts where they sort of have a food truck set up during lunch over by the pool area, and we've seen things like tacos or paellas served there. So most of the time, all of those restaurants are included, but there are some all-inclusive resorts that have sort of a premium package that you can buy. So essentially you're paying more for your overall package and you are treated as a premium guest. So you may have an additional option for dinner, or you may be able to eat at an a la carte restaurant for breakfast or for lunch that other guests cannot eat at. As far as drinks are concerned, on a cruise ship, usually your alcohol, sodas, specialty coffees, none of that is included in your cruise fare. Usually it's just water, lemonade, maybe some juice, and coffee and tea. But if you do want to get a specialty coffee or a glass of alcohol, you can either pay separately for each item, Or you can get what is called a drink package. Now, they have different levels of drink packages offered, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the cost section a little later on. Some cruise lines will allow you to take on 2 bottles of wine per cabin, or maybe a case of water or sodas, because not even bottled water is included in your cruise fare on most cruise lines. At an all-inclusive resort, all of your alcohol, your specialty coffees, all of that is all included. The only thing that might be excluded is that sometimes they will provide the top shelf alcohol only to their premium guests or to their timeshare members. If you are finding this information helpful so far, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel for more content. In almost all cases, if size of the room is important to you, then an all-inclusive resort is the way to go. In almost all cases, the cabins on a cruise ship are going to be under 200 square feet. So you start with your basic room, which is an interior. That means it doesn't have any windows to it, and those are pretty tiny. Now you move up and you go into the ocean view category, which will usually have a porthole or a window. Then you move up to a balcony cabin, which clearly has a balcony. And then you move on to the suite categories, which can be larger in size. But everything up to a balcony is going to usually have less than 200 square feet. Now, I have to say that they have done an incredible job in maximizing the space in these cabins. They have really made the best use for storage and finding ways and tricks to make things feel and look a little bit bigger. Also, if you are in a balcony cabin, I have to say that there's nothing like waking up in the morning, walking out onto your balcony and see the ship pulling into a new island. And even if you are not in port somewhere, just looking out at the vast ocean is a real treat of an experience. A resort on land will usually have a lot more space in the rooms. A lot of the rooms that we have stayed in are usually 500 square feet or even larger. And you'll have a balcony or a patio. Some of them will have hot tubs on them. We've even stayed in a room where you had a swim out suite, meaning that you walk out onto your patio and then there's a pool. It might be a private pool or it could be a semi-private pool. Now, usually in your rooms, you're going to have a spectacular and spacious bathroom, and you have snacks, and you will have a mini fridge that is usually stocked with beer, juice, waters, and sodas. And so you're not going to get that on a cruise ship. On a cruise ship, you might have an empty refrigerator, but you're not going to have anything in there. And remember, you're going to have to pay to get those sodas. I do not go on cruises for the pools. As a matter of fact, I have been on several cruises where I didn't even get into a pool. They are usually too small and too crowded. Now, some of the ships will have some other areas a little quieter, maybe towards the back of the ship, where they might have another pool, a couple of hot tubs, and I might get into one of those, but I'm not going on a cruise to get into a pool. And speaking of crowded, if you are on the ship on a sea day, that means everybody is on board and they're all trying to use the pool. So finding a lounge chair, trying to get into the pool, it just feels too crowded. The pools at an all-inclusive resort are going to be much larger and, in my opinion, much nicer than what you can find on a cruise ship. And you might have several different options to choose from. You might have the activities pool where things are going on. There might be music playing. Then you might have an area where it's quieter, so you go to that pool. Some hotels have adults-only pool sections so that you can get away from the kids if you want to. You might have resorts that have a lazy river, and almost all all-inclusive resorts will have a swim bar, which you're not going to find on a cruise ship. Let's talk about the cost. Now, a lot of people like to take cruises because they are affordable, but in my opinion, taking a cruise, you usually have so many added extras that it ends up being about the same price, if not even more, than going to an all-inclusive resort. So here's why. At an all-inclusive resort, you usually have a spacious room with a balcony, your alcoholic beverages are included, your Wi-Fi is included, and in most cases, all of the restaurants are included at that rate. On a cruise, the price starts off in an interior cabin, and so you may have to pay extra to upgrade to an ocean view cabin or to a balcony or even a suite. And now remember, alcohol is not included in your cabin price. So either you're going to have to pay as you go if you want to get that alcohol, soda, or specialty coffee, or you can purchase a beverage package, but those can be very expensive. On Carnival, you're going to pay $82 per person per night for a beverage package. And they force everybody in that cabin to get the beverage package. So if I don't drink, but my spouse does, I have to get the package as well. So now you're up to $164 per night to get this alcoholic beverage and specialty coffee package. On a cruise, Wi-Fi is typically not included in the price, and you may pay up to $30 per device per day to connect to the ship's Wi-Fi. And remember that the Wi-Fi on the ship is not going to be nearly as good as what you're going to get at home because you're out to sea. Additionally, if you're going to fly into the cruise port, it is always recommended that you fly in the day before so that if there's any delays, you're not going to miss your cruise ship. But that just means that you are going to have an additional cost of a hotel night to factor into your price. All that said, if you are trying to keep it simple and you don't need all of those extra things, then a cruise could be potentially a lot cheaper for you. Another way that a cruise might be cheaper is if you live near a cruise port and you can just drive there instead of fly. That could save you several $100s per person. Now, if you're going to an all-inclusive resort, you almost always have to fly to those. So it's just an additional cost savings that you might have if you're taking a cruise and can drive in. You also may not need to get a passport if you're going on a cruise. While all the cruise lines will recommend it, a lot of them will allow you to cruise without a passport and just take your birth certificate and ID if the cruise is leaving from the US and is returning to the same port after the cruise is over. So you'll have to check with the cruise line to be sure and see what is required for that particular cruise line, but that might save you some money if you don't already have passports. In either case, if you're taking a cruise or all-inclusive resort and you want to do any kinds of excursions while you're in port on the cruise, or if you want to leave the resort and do something, those excursions can get quite expensive, so be sure to factor that into your cost. If you're the type of person that likes adventure and trying something new every day, then a cruise might be something that you will prefer. Now, there's something going on the ship at all hours, so you'll always have something to do to keep you busy if that's what you like. There is more structure on a cruise. You are in port certain times of the day, so you have to be back by a certain hour or the cruise ship will leave you. You might have a set dining time, so you are sticking to that schedule as well. But it's not to say that a cruise can't be relaxing. Most cruise ships will have plenty of quiet spaces, both indoors and outdoors, for you to hang out at. And most cruise ships also have a spa, so if you want to go get a massage and unwind, you can do that. But overall, I think a cruise is designed to provide you with maximum entertainment. There's something going on all the time. You're going to several ports. So naturally, it's just going to be a busier type of pace. Resorts are generally more relaxing and created for unwinding. You might just hang out by the pool or at the beach all day. And probably the only set structure you will have is you may have dinner reservations. And if you want to relax even more, you will find some of the most incredible spas at all-inclusive resorts. And these spas are massive, they are gorgeous, and it's nothing that they could ever fit onto a cruise ship. Sometimes you might just want to have a vacation where there aren't any kids around and you're looking for that adults-only experience. Now, currently there is only one mainstream cruise line, Virgin Voyages, that is completely kid-free. You have to be 18 or older to cruise with Virgin Voyages. Now, that is the only one, so you're very limited in your options. But for all-inclusive resorts, you have several adults-only options. You might have some that are standalone adults-only hotels, and then you might have a section at a larger resort that is restricted for adults only. There's a wide variety of options, and you'll want to research a little bit more before you choose your resort. Of course, there are going to be some drawbacks to each type of vacation you choose. So let's start with cruises. Now, first of all, although you don't see it often, there are people who get seasick on cruise ships. Now, sometimes when I'm on a cruise ship, I even forget that I'm out at sea because they are so large, you just don't feel the movement. But some people are very sensitive and they might get seasick. Obviously, all the extra costs for your drinks, your Wi-Fi, and specialty dining, that can be a huge drawback. But I think it just depends on what type of vacation you want to take. And as a matter of fact, not having Wi-Fi, it may be a great excuse to just disconnect from the world. Having limited time in each port is a big drawback for me. So you have to be sure that you get back to the ship by a certain hour, and I find myself always looking at my watch every time I'm in port just to make sure that I'm going to get back on time. It's just me, I have anxiety about those things. The crowds on the ship can also be a big drawback. If you're thinking about getting breakfast on a day that you're coming into port and you go over to the buffet, good luck trying to find a table, and you will usually find long queues in the lines of the buffets because everybody's doing the same thing. They're trying to get a little breakfast before they get off the ship. At an all-inclusive resort, you might feel a little bit isolated. A lot of these resorts are nowhere near town, so it's not like you can just leave, walk out, and go shopping. You're kind of stuck there unless you're going to take a taxi somewhere or go onto an excursion. If you are staying on the resort property for most of the time, you might feel that the food starts to get a little bit repetitive. While usually you have different dinner options, your breakfast and your lunch might be at the same place every day. And you might feel that that is just starting to feel like you're eating the same thing every day. At least on a cruise ship, usually you're getting off port and you're going to have at least one meal out in whatever island that you are visiting. So you feel like you get a little bit of variation, where on the resort, it's kind of like the same thing every day. Another drawback to an all-inclusive resort is the need to have small bills with you basically at all times. So on a cruise, your gratuities are added at the end of the cruise, and you might tip a few people in addition to that at the end of your cruise. But at an all-inclusive resort, you are going to want to have small bills in cash, and you are going to tip people as you go. Being at an all-inclusive resort, some people might get bored. Some people don't like just sitting at the pool or going to the beach. They need to be entertained at all times and have activities going on all the time. And really, it's just going to depend on the resort that you are visiting as far as how many and what kind of activities they are offering. But for some people, you might just get bored and want to have more to do. At the end of the day, whether you choose a cruise or an all-inclusive vacation, you will likely have a great time. It's what you make of it, right? But we do hope that this information helps you narrow down your choice a little bit more. And if you are looking for more information, we have playlists for cruises and we have playlists for all-inclusive resorts. So I recommend that you go watch some of our other videos to help you narrow it down even more.